Hey Global Village, what's up? Okay, today I want to talk about anxiety, and no doubt it may be a little rambly. As always, I'm just really speaking off the top of my head, but nonetheless, it's actually quite an important subject to me personally, and I simply want to sort of share my thoughts and also my strategies with regards to dealing with it. So, first thing to say is I'm sure everyone deals with differing levels of anxiety, but I think there can come a point where it can be a genuine issue in your life, where it can become quite malignant and it sort of can metastasize and gain a life of its own where it snowballs and grows bigger and bigger. And for me personally, while I've always experienced some level of anxiety in my life, it's never felt like it would overwhelm me in the way it did after I lost most of my eyesight. So the first thing, obviously, once I started losing my sight, was the trauma of that, but eventually I managed to find my way through that and reached sort of a kind of homeostasis in my life where I felt a lot happier and a lot more peaceful about what had happened to me and my life going forward. In effect, I reached a point where I felt that life was something that was still worth living and that it had something to offer me, and also, hopefully I still had something to offer life. So upon reaching that point, however, I did not resolve all of the, I think, issues that came of this happening to me. And I'm not talking about the physical or practical issues, but the psychological and emotional issues. And one of them is definitely growing and much more prevalent bouts of anxiety. So I guess, like, to give a simple example here of what I'm talking about, and it's trivial, but I think it does highlight the point well enough. I've pretty much always mowed my own lawns ever since I bought this house, which is a considerable length of time ago now. And I hit a point probably about, 6 or 7 months ago, roughly, where my old lawnmower finally conked out on me. Now, prior to that happening, mowing my lawns after losing a significant amount of my eyesight presented a brand new challenge, but nonetheless I was quite determined to keep doing it, as well as just saving a little bit of money. It's just something that's physically healthy for me to do, and it also feels like I haven't become completely useless, that I can still actually do something. I feel like I can still safely operate my lawnmower and effectively do it. I mean, it's slightly amusing to say this, but daisies are my best friends because they clearly indicate to me if I've missed a patch of the lawn. So they just make sure I actually mow everything I need to mow. So yeah, I'm big on daisies. And they also tell me when it's time to mow the lawn as well, when they start populating the garden. Now, the thing is, I found that after losing a lot of my sight, mowing the lawn became something that would genuinely generated anxiety in me, and a lot of it was because it just became a much more challenging task. I confronted that, but sometimes I would let the lawn grow longer than it should, so it became a harder job, which of course, on top of my visual impairment, just kind of made it even tougher. But, I kind of got a handle on that. But then when my lawnmower broke, I just had this horrific wave of anxiety and panic, really. It was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And of course, what you do is you just buy a new lawnmower. And I reached out to a mate. I checked online, did a bit of searching. I was almost going to pull the trigger and just buy one online. But then I thought, I'm going to ask a mate of mine to come around and we'll just go to Mitre 10 and we'll just pick one out in person. And he was more than happy to do that. So we went out and we bought myself a brand new lawnmower. Now the thing is, because it was a new lawnmower, it was different from my old one, and as well as actually getting it all set up and put together, which my friend helped me to do, it just had, different ways of actually running it. And this did actually present a couple of unfortunate problems. Like, one of them was the attachment to the main handle grip was by way of just a hand screw, where you would just tighten it up. There was a plastic screw that on either side of the handle that you would tighten up, which would affix it to the lawnmower. Now, one of these became loose, and because of my visual impairment, I had no idea that was happening until it completely disassembled itself while I was in the middle of mowing the lawn. And bits and pieces just went flying, the bolt went flying, I actually ran the lawnmower over the top of it, and it just shot off in some direction. I was never able to find it again. I was able to find the plastic screw, or cap, but that was basically it. And so this caused me tremendous stress and anxiety, and I did end up just taping the thing on until I managed to get my cousin to help me find a replacement bolt, and we put it all back together again. And now I check it every time I use it. But the reality is, like, never before in my life had the simple act of something so trivial as mowing my lawn had never before caused me anxiety, but now it legitimately did. And one of the things that I would do to deal, or should I say not deal with that, is simply ignore the fact that it was time to mow my lawns. And of course, it becomes a bigger and bigger problem, and then it starts to weigh down on you, and how something so trivial can become such an oppressive thing in your life is just an example of malignant anxiety. So that's just a simple example. So the next thing I want to talk about is, well, what are the things that you can do to actually deal with it? Well, the first thing I think is to recognize that anxiety isn't something you just take a pill for. It's not something you can inoculate yourself from and it will forever go away. It's an inherent part of being human. So it's more about, how do we deal with it? How do we stop it metastasizing and getting bigger and worse? And so the first thing is to recognize when you're suffering it. So it's to acknowledge that, yes, I'm dealing with an issue of anxiety right now, and then to seek out what exactly is the source of that anxiety. And so once you've done that, one, you've identified it, two, you've identified what the source is. That's a great start. The next thing is to ask yourself, well, is this actually something in my control, or is it something completely outside of my control? And if it's the latter, then the way to deal with it is to deal with the negative self-talk that's causing it to metastasize and get bigger and bigger inside your own head. Because if it is literally outside of your own control, then there is nothing you can do about it. Assumedly, any of the things that you can do, you have done. So stressing and getting wound up about it is simply it's not serving you in any practical way. So you recognize it's not serving you. You recognize you can't do anything to actually deal with this. So you just confront the negative self-talk that is causing it to weigh you down. Now, the next thing is, if you decide that it is something you can deal with, what I've found is that often in those circumstances, the problem can seem overwhelming, like it can just seem too big to deal with. And when that happens, the anxiety just gets worse and worse, and you tend to just run from the problem. So the solution I found to this is to actually break it down into small, manageable pieces. So instead of looking at this as one giant problem that's just too much for you to really cope with emotionally and psychologically, you say, well, what are small pieces of this that I can deal with that I feel like isn't going to overwhelm me? And you just then break down these tasks, you kind of figure out a logical order for dealing with them, and then you just start dealing with those tasks one at a time, and you make them as trivial and as small as you need them to be. Like, for example, if you're dealing with like super terrible anxiety and just getting up in the morning feels like hell, it feels like a major achievement, well, then you can set yourself the task of say, well, my first goal today is I'm just going to make my bed. And, you set that as your goal and you get your bed made, and you can then say, I've done that. And then you can just say, well, the next thing is I'm just going to go and make myself a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. I'm going to go and clear my emails. So you just break down things to the smallest level that you need to in order to be able to still feel like you can function like a normal person. And this can create a positive feedback loop, because as soon as you start making little dents in the seemingly overwhelming task, which ultimately might be quite trivial in the big scheme of things, and you can see yourself that, hey, look, I'm actually making progress here, then it becomes a positive feedback loop, and then the anxiety will reduce. You will start to feel better about yourself as a person, and you're now moving in a positive direction. And again, you just keep doing that. You just keep ticking it off. You'd start developing, things that you do in your life which actually make you feel better about yourself. And again, you've made these things small enough that they're achievable. So I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say. I've said before, when I create these videos, I'll talk whatever the hell I want to talk about. If I had any serious intention of creating a channel that I actually wanted to go anywhere and become popular, I certainly wouldn't be just talking about anything that comes into my head, as I tend to do with these videos. But in using it that way, it feels like it's something that's actually serving me. Because it allows me to talk about things that I feel are relevant and important. And who knows, maybe someone will chance the video and it will actually be useful and relevant to them. And it doesn't have to be today, it could be sometime in the future. We don't know. Anyway, that's pretty much all I wanted to say today. Bendy out.